restricted time period, there seems to be automatically stamped that it's no recourse to public funds. Do we have any sense of how that is taking place across the country as a whole, and any kind of sense of numbers?
So, so essentially, just being a little bit technical here, asylum seekers shouldn't be stamped with no recourse to public funds. So what I would actually suggest is that the people who are getting that are actually falling into another category around discretionary leave to remain.
I think it's refugees when they come to renew their applications. You know, refugees are only getting 2.5 years now. When they renew their applications, a lot of people, members of our organisation aren't here tonight, really unfortunately, have been finding that they've been getting no recourse to public funds when they apply for when they reapply for their status after 2.5 years. And I'm very well concerned that some of these have been challenged on an individual basis, some quite successfully. I'm particularly concerned about people who don't know where to go to challenge anything, you know.
Of course, and quite rightly so. Let me break that up into three parts. There is a national campaign that we're leading around no recourse to public funds. Again, look on the website, you can join in on that. We've got a meeting, although it's in London, there'll be an opportunity to Skype in if people wish, on the 3rd of October. And that's very much about bringing people who directly live in the experience, but also campaigners and solicitors together to mount a campaign. So one of the, I don't think there's a way in immigration policy at the moment for everybody to work on the same issue at the same time, because every locality has got slightly different pressures, and we should all be working in solidarity to support one another's campaigns. So whatever's relevant for Leicester should remain relevant for Leicester. You shouldn't be conforming to a national model. So if your concern is around asylum seekers, then we from London should at least be supporting you in solidarity and providing resources around that. In terms of, now, just taking it from a very crude technical point, asylum seekers, when they are granted refugee status, are granted full rights, right? So they should have access to public funds. I think what some people are confusing refugees with is people who've been granted discretionary leave to remain, which is, so some people may have been waiting, they may have initially been an asylum seeker, but the Home Office has refused them permission in the refugee category and put them into another category called discretionary leave to remain. And that is when, more often than not, the no recourse funds is stamped on the card.
Well, we were finding that people who had exceptional leave to remain were getting it. But then we found that they were extending it to other people.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, they do. And how you challenge that is if you can demonstrate that there's destitution, then you can apply for a lift to have that removed. And that's done at, it was stuff that was unregulated, and it's quite a simple form. It's now regulated under the Office of the Immigration Services Commissioner, so you have to have somebody at OIC level 1, or probably get a solicitor if you can't find someone at level 1 to actually do that. Sometimes you can get people to work under community care to get it removed, but there is quite a burden of evidence, so you have to provide bank statements, you have to provide evidence of destitution if you've borrowed money. So one of the problems around it is if people have been in a PARDA system and they've had money in the community circulating that they've shared, well, often those individuals have actually got that money while they've not had the right to work in the UK, and then they end up exposing themselves as well. So it's quite a nuanced, complicated business, but do not despair. If there are people who are affected by that, definitely worth trying to get some solicitor or some pro bono advice to see if it can be removed.
Okay,
well, the trouble is, there's a big problem with simply dealing with people on an individual basis. And if you've got to prove you're destitute, I mean, suppose you're working, but you've got this, you know, this thing.
You're not destitute,
you still need access to public funds. You know, I mean, you've got kids in school, you've got, you know, you've got healthcare, you've got all sorts of things.
So the lift.
And I'm concerned. I'm not saying you, but I get a lot of. I sign loads of petitions and see a lot of websites, and I've not I've not seen it being raised around the country as an issue particularly at all. I've seen a lot about asylum seekers, but I've not seen much about refugees.
But it's not a refugees issue, that's what I'm saying. It's not a refugees issue, it falls into a different category. So, so again, there are ways to tackle it. I totally get your point, it needs to be tackled, and I think there are mechanisms, and we'll send you some further information if it helps.
That'd be helpful. Okay, could we open it up to the meeting in terms of questions to Rita, Linton, or indeed Chris?
Can I just a comment really?
Sorry, Alistair, can you say your name and
Oh right, sorry. My name is Leicester. Yeah, just an interested person in this issue. You were talking about people working and encouraging people to work. I'm mainly looking at the younger people who are here, so who fall into being given discretionary leave to remain, and then they have to apply when they're 18, and then it's like a rope which you don't know when the end is coming, and you see their lives ticking over year by year, and it's like nothing. It's like I don't know, a limbo situation. I don't know. It's like people become non-people. They're not supposed to do X, Y, Z. And you think, how could you, if somebody's a human person, they want to be able to do things, and it's so soul destroying to see young people's lives being taken for rubbish. It's not even, it's almost as if they don't exist, but they do exist. But there's nothing that anybody seems to be able to do. And it's like, what do you do? How can we help?
Okay, Rita, do you want to
I can give you some very practical advice around that. So the issue around young people, they usually have an allocated social worker, in theory, yeah. I would suggest to you, and this is something that you collectively can do quite easily, is start being a bit more nosy around what your social services departments are doing, yeah? And I don't know how it's structured, but what you will find is it's worth inquiring from local councillors. Has Leicester applied to the Controlling Migration Fund? So this is a fund which is meant in theory to be for host communities, so they don't feel the impact of migration, which is a ridiculous way to phrase something. But it's worth you inquiring from social services the number of care leavers who don't have refugee status, because what actually then starts happening is that, or don't have any status at all. What starts happening is that social workers, because of the churn in staffing, forget that this child doesn't have status, and forget even when the child is eligible to apply for their documentation, which means that road just gets longer and longer because the young person becomes, in a sense, without any paperwork at all.
Yeah, but when they reach a certain age, it's like, if they're not in education, social services not here, they're leaving care people not here, everybody disappears.
Yes. But that's why we need to pick them up before they reach that point and make sure that social services have that duty of care to actually, because it is social services' responsibility to make sure that these people are sorted out through the immigration system. So sometimes when people are below 16 and they're given 2.5 years until they reach that age, it's up to the social worker to make sure that that's renewed or that an appropriate application is put in. But so many social workers don't do it, which is why so many of our young people are left in limbo.
But there's loads of, well, not hundreds, but there are significant amounts of young people who are just left.
But I'd definitely say
Could
inquire
I
about social
ask, Melissa,
Yeah.
is that an issue that you've taken up with after 18?
After
18 leave?
yeah.
And what's their response to that?
People are in, basically people got legal representation, but once it's like, if you renew, I was one of the Windrush generation people, you put your thing into Home Office and they sit on it. So what can you do? You know you've got a case supposed to be coming up, but until it's dealt with and you go to whatever, it's in the system, isn't it? Until they pick your case up and you can't do anything because and so when you try to do anything, you can't phone Home Office, you go through your solicitor, and they said, "Well, we're still waiting on this, or we're still waiting on that," and you're just stopped. It's like a wall. You can't go through.
And even if you go to your MP is just
Yeah,
given
and-
a block a waiting list.
Yeah. So it's like, it's almost like they throw people's passports, or they haven't got passports, but you know, they're just there, and when the time comes, oh yes, we'll move one. It's that. Yeah. I think people are doing what they can, but I'm just saying, for lots of people, they're in this limbo situation.
Yeah, and sometimes it's difficult to work out whether it's a political will or whether it's lack of funding, and often to investigate these cases, if there's no one to look at it, then it won't get looked at. And if the government are not prepared to invest the money in trying to clear the cases and get it sorted, then it won't happen. It'll just sit there. And that, so it may be being blocked for political reasons. It may be being blocked because there's just no one to clear it.
And we also know the other side of that coin is in terms of access to justice, the cutbacks on social welfare advice and legal aid over these last few years has meant that, you know, even that avenue for potential challenge has been curtailed severely. Any other comments or questions? Did you have a comment or question?
Alan
Can you
Lowe.
sort of say your name and then your
Alan Lowe from ETA Project. We are the mental health provider. I'm the psychotherapy. Over the last 5 years, we received a lot of young person come to us for the counseling service or psychotherapy. The problem is what we are identifying. Just earlier, Rita mentioned about social service in Leicester. I can tell you, it's none of any service from Leicester City Council social service. Because what used to be, they have the caseworkers from either Milton Keynes or London side. Because the last 10 years, a lot of young person being allocated to Leicester City from the beginning by the foster care with the foster family. Once they are upon 18, they have to go out to the support living, what they call support living. And then they will arrange as a request by the person, and then the London social worker or Milton Keynes will come in, okay, arrange some